So welcome. We are here to talk about self-management, and in particular my journey with self-management. I'm mum of a daughter who's 22 years of age. She has very high physical support needs, and we've actually been in NDIS for about 5 years. We're from the Barwon region, so we were part of the trial site, and so we've actually been through the mill a few times with NDIS. So it's been, for my daughter, a really exciting and wonderful journey. For me, it's been a lot of hard work. So does anybody here have an ISP, an individual support package? We've got a couple. Do any of you self-manage or do direct payments? All right, well, under NDIS it's totally different. All right, so I naively thought that, you know, if I self-manage my ISP, I can self-manage my NDIS. They're nowhere near the same in the process that you have to do. I'm going to give you some basics about self-managing. I'm not able to tell you everything today. Some of you have been to some of the other sessions that incorporate some basics about NDIS, so I'm not going to go over those, you know, accessing NDIS and that kind of information. I'm here to talk to you about self-management, but I can't talk to you about self-management without talking about the other management options in regard to NDIS. So, just to get started. So, the fund management choices under NDIS, there are 3 different ways to manage the funds. This choice is actually made at your NDIS planning meeting. So, and when we say our NDIS planning meeting, NDIS actually call your planning meeting a pre-planning meeting. So it's really important that you get that terminology correct. Your pre-planning meeting is your planning meeting. From your pre-planning meeting, NDIS go away and they develop your plan. So part of your pre-planning is to decide how you're going to manage the money in the plan, how you're going to manage the budget and how you're going to have bills paid, etc. So you can change in a management option later can only occur if you have a plan review, and plan reviews take quite a bit of time to arrange and organise, so you could find that your natural plan review is coming along before you can actually get an additional plan review. So NDIS try to avoid plan reviews, and in some respects you should too. You should only do plan reviews when they're absolutely necessary, because there are a lot of hard work for everybody. So you need to make that decision about managing your funds at your pre-planning meeting. So you have to put some thought into it before you get started. So first of all, you've got to understand that there is a couple of portals. There's a provider portal and there's a participant portal. So the provider portal is what your service providers will use to make claims against your plan and to get information on their obligations in regard to being a provider. The participant portal will have your plan, have your family members' basic information, and if you are self-managing, it's through that participant portal that you'll actually make claims. So if you're considering self-managing and you don't have access to a computer, it's going to be much harder for you to self-manage. It's not impossible, but it is harder. So everybody who becomes a participant under NDIS will need access to the participant portal through MyGov. We're not going to talk today about how you get in to do that, but that is how you make claims under self-managing. I'm going to skip. This is a presentation that normally goes over 2 hours, so there's a few slides that I'm going to not go into detail about. Under NDIA, there are two types of providers, registered providers and non-registered providers. So this is where self-management or plan management can be helpful, because you can use either of those types of providers. Whereas if your money is NDIA managed, you can only use registered providers. Registered providers are people who have gone through a process to become registered with NDIA. So in some respects, you might call them preferred providers, but they've proven to NDIA that they're qualified and able to provide supports in the area that they're registered for. Whereas unregistered providers is any business out there who has an ABN and can provide an invoice for their services. So if you actually use unregistered providers, it's up to you to ensure that they're insured and qualified and capable of doing the services that you want them to do. You need to remember, under self-managing, you can use either. And as a self-manager myself, at present, I only use 2 unregistered providers of the 10 or 12 providers that I have. There's only 2 that are unregistered. So you don't necessarily need the variety of registered and unregistered providers. So it's important to remember that the NDIA is a funding plan. It's an annual allocation of money for all the supports. The money's actually paid in arrears. So with an ISP or other forms of funding, the money either sat with your provider and they then provided a service, or with an ISP you just got paid a certain amount on a regular basis and then you paid your providers. Under NDIA, the service must be provided before the service provider gets paid. So that means that the service provider is paid in arrears. So this is a different way of your service providers providing their service. With your NDIA plan, you're meant to budget the funds. If you're going to spend more than you've been allocated, you're going to have to go back to review. But remember, reviews take time. If you've got money left at the end, NDIA may say, well, you don't need all the money that you had last year, so we'll just fund you the same amount as you've actually spent. So if you underspend in your plan, you actually have to justify that to NDIA. So managing the plans in your fund, in reality, you're only managing the payment process. So of the 3 funding options, it's about receiving the tax invoice, making a claim on the portal and paying the service provider for the invoice. And you're meant to budget and monitor the expenditure. So here are your management options: NDIA managed, plan managed, self-managed, and at the bottom there's a little automated transport part, and that's an option that NDIA has put forward so that if you have transport funding, you can have an amount paid to you weekly, fortnightly or monthly, the same amount, so that your transport funding lasts for the whole year. Does that make sense? So you might have, say you've got $2,000 of transport funding, then they'll just divide it 52 ways or 26 ways or 12 ways, depending on what you've chosen, and they'll pay regularly down into a bank account that you've nominated. And that's so that people don't spend all their transport money straight away, and to ensure that you've got transport funds available throughout the whole year. Once you spend that money, obviously you have to use your own funds to contribute to your transport costs. But really what we're here to talk about is self-management. So I'll just give you, I'm not going to, you can use any of those 3 management options, or you can use a mixture in your plan. That's important for you to understand. You don't have to just pick one funding method, one management method. You can have any of them. So with NDIA management, your provider goes on to the provider portal, makes a claim against your plan, and they receive the money within a couple of days. They have to have an accounting system, they have to produce an invoice on their system, but NDIA don't receive an invoice or paperwork. The provider makes a claim electronically to NDIA through the participant portal. So there's no paper shuffling or anything like that between NDIA and the providers. But the providers do have a lot of guidelines that they have to meet in order to make a claim. They have to have provided the service to you. They can't be billing for services that they haven't provided. If you NDIA manage, really you don't have to do much at all. You don't even get to receive an invoice unless you ask for an invoice. So with plan management, you actually have to have a plan manager funded in your plan. They get paid to do the job of receiving an invoice from you. So you receive the invoice from your provider, you approve it, you send it to your plan manager, who then goes onto the provider portal and they make a claim against your plan. So you at least get to see the invoice and check it. And the plan manager then makes a claim on the portal and pays the provider. But they get paid a fee for doing that, so you need to make sure that you ask for funding for a plan manager at your planning meeting. So the subject that we're all here about is self-managing, so do it yourself. So with self-managing, you need to open up a bank account that will be exclusively used for to receive money from NDIA that you then go and pay your providers. So you choose and manage the services and supports. You do that anyway. If you NDIA manage or plan manage, you select and manage your services. Okay, NDIA don't do it for you. The plan manager doesn't do it for you. So self-managing the funds is about paying accounts, receiving accounts, claiming on the portal and paying them. Some people think that NDIA or a plan manager are actually going to manage your services, and they're not. So no matter what option you ask for, you will be managing the services and supports. But in self-managing, you will be receiving the invoices from your providers, you'll be checking them, and then you go onto the participant portal and you make a claim against your family member's plan. The funds then get paid down into your bank account, the NDIA bank account that you've created, so that you can pay your provider's account. So you need to set up a bank account to manage the funds, and you can self-manage all or part of the funds. But again, you must nominate this at your planning meetings. So you can use registered or non-registered providers. So I've already explained this, that with your registered providers and unregistered providers, with NDIA, you must use the registered providers. Plan managers, you can use registered or non-registered, and the same with self-managed. There's a few pros and cons in regard to each management option, and you might want to take a photo of that particular slide if you, because it's possibly one of the most helpful bits of information. With NDIA managed, there's less responsibility for you. You don't even have to see an account if you don't want to, and it's basically in the hands of your service provider. And for some families, that's the option that they'll choose because they really don't want to get too deeply involved in the service provision and the accounts. They'd like things to just be done the way they are today. But essentially under NDIA, it does change. With plan managed, you have more choice and more control. You need to receive the invoice and approve it. You shouldn't be having them sent directly to your plan manager without your approval. Or maybe you'll set up some kind of system where your plan manager gets the invoice and so do you, and then you let your plan manager know that you approve of that invoice. Your plan manager doesn't go and sort out incorrect bills. If you've been billed for a service that wasn't provided, your plan manager has no control over that. They aren't organising who's doing what on what day. All they're doing is paying the invoices that you're sending them. So you still have to deal with your service providers in regard to service provision. So that's a really important thing for you to remember, that NDIA managed, plan managed, self-managed, with all of those, you are still managing the services that are coming in and out of your home or the service that's being provided in day programs and other settings for your family member. With self-managed, you do have more choices. So if you had funding for a cleaner, for instance, you could get, the gym's cleaning franchise to clean the house. You could get the gym's mowing people to do the gardening and maintenance if you have that kind of funding in your plan. What you need to do if you're going to use unregistered providers is that you need to make sure that they're actually a legitimate business. They need to be able to provide you with a tax invoice in order to provide the service. You can't have somebody, you can't pay somebody cash and then expect that you can claim a reimbursement from NDIA. You can, at times, if you have a tax receipt, but you can't just pay somebody cash and they write on a piece of paper, received, $50 and then claim it from NDIA. That doesn't work. They have to be a legitimate business. So you don't get out of budgeting your annual allocation either. No matter what management method you use, you actually have to budget the money to last the whole year. So it's something that you can't escape, something you need to do, but you can get help with it. So, some of you will ask for plan management funding in your plan, but some of you might also ask for support coordination funding. And hopefully you've seen there's a whole lot of services offering support coordination out there. And if you feel that you need help with getting your plan implemented and finding the right services for your situation, then you should be asking NDIA for support coordination when you have your planning meeting, because that is the person that can help you with finding the right kind of services and getting them underway and getting all the paperwork ready that's going to enable you to move forward with your plan. Which that's what that's about. Help with managing the budget, your support coordinator. You can get extra funding for financial and service intermediary, and they can help you a bit more with service provision. So support coordinators and hourly financial and service intermediary. can help you. Or you can ask for assistance from your NDIS planner or your local area coordinator. Most people with plans will have a relationship with a local area coordinator, and that's somebody who should be able to assist them. So are the rules different for self-managers? Not really, but you have to do basically what a service provider would have to do, and that is you must keep invoices for 5 years. You must be careful to ensure you spend the funds in accordance with the goals in your plan. So you just can't change your mind and decide, well, you know, I haven't used all of that support worker time, so I think we'll just go and we'll take our family member on a holiday because we said we wanted them to get out doing social and recreational stuff. NDIS doesn't pay for holidays. They may pay for support workers to go on holidays with you, but they don't pay for, you know, airfares and accommodation and stuff like that. You can't suddenly decide, well, our family member needs a new trampoline, and get them a trampoline out of your funds. It's not what the money was funded for in the first place. So you have to use the money in accordance with your goals. You can use registered and non-registered providers. You can pay providers more or less than the price guide. So that's an important difference, that you might have a lady down the road who's prepared to get an ABN. She's prepared to get an ABN. She's prepared to take out personal accident insurance because you need to make sure that there's no risk to you and your family if somebody trips over the front doorstep coming to provide services in your home. You don't want to be liable. So, the lady down the street might be prepared to get an ABN and be insured, and you might also require that she has a current first aid certificate, and you'll do a police check on her as well. But that is a legitimate unregistered provider. So that's what you can do as a self-manager. You can have that flexibility, but it does put more responsibility on you, and you sort of have to do a bit of due diligence like any business would do in regard to a provider. And that way you can actually negotiate prices that are lower or higher than the NDIS price guide. The price guide's available on the NDIS website, and it's a crucial document. If anybody gets the opportunity to read it, you should. It gives you lots and lots of information. You cannot make service bookings with providers. Service bookings are a new thing that NDIS started, and it's a layer of extra work for you and, well, for your service providers as well. So as a self-manager, I don't have to do service bookings, which I love. Because I'm paying my service providers, so they don't need a service booking to make a claim against my daughter's plan because I'm paying them. So it takes out a level of administration from your point of view and from the service provider's point of view. I know you're all going, what on earth is service booking? You'll learn about that in the NDIS process. You should have service agreements with your providers, so you should have some kind of document that sets out the terms that you want to do business by. And often your service providers will come to you with a document like that saying, our cancellation policy for a shift is, 1 week. And I'd be going, what? 1 week? I don't like that at all. I'd like to be able to give my service providers 24-hour notice of a shift cancellation. But you've got to be careful, because sometimes when we're talking about cancellation, they're talking about cancellation of the arrangement that they have. So we need to be specific about what we want from a provider. if a provider doesn't want to do business with me anymore, I might want 4 weeks' notice. They might want 4 weeks' notice so that they can let their staff know, well, you know, Donna doesn't want you anymore. So, you know, we've got 4 weeks to find you another job. So cancellation of service with the service provider is different to cancellation of a shift. So a service agreement sets out those arrangements. So it's just a general agreement as this is how we're going to do business together. NDIS says you must have service agreements. I have service agreements with only 2 or 3 of my service providers because they're all general businesses and they all have their general terms of business which are very quite acceptable to me. I don't have to have a special signed agreement with them that sets out my terms. You may be audited at any time. So just like any of the other businesses, because you're receiving and paying out money, NDIA can audit you at any time. And certainly in the future they'll be auditing on a regular basis. So this is one of the reasons you need to keep your information for 5 years, but it is that you need to have legitimate invoices for the services that have been provided to you. And NDIA will have more audits as everybody gets rolled onto the system. They're going to do audits more often. You can direct employ if you self-manage. You can also direct employ if you plan manage. That's a big step. When we're talking about direct employing, we're talking about you being the employer and paying wages and tax and all that kind of stuff and the bookwork that goes along with that. But you don't have to be a direct employer to self-manage. I use registered service providers for all of my personal care needs for my daughter. I haven't found a need to direct employ at all. So, but it's a personal choice. You do have that flexibility if you self-manage. If you're self-managing, you have to be able to pay accounts on time. You have that obligation to your service providers. So there's that need for speed in a way. By the time you receive an invoice, it might already be 7 or 14 days, or maybe even a month after the service has been provided. So you need to be able to check that and claim it off the portal in order to pay the provider. And NDIA gives you about 90 days after a service is provided to be able to make a claim, so you can't sit on things for too long. Plus your service providers are expecting to be paid within 14 days of providing the service in most cases. So you have to be able to put the time in. I would think that you'd be wanting to do claims on the portal fortnightly. Monthly would not be sufficient or often enough for many of your providers. So if you think you have the time and the energy to be able to do that, fantastic. I find I have to create an Excel sheet to be able to record all the invoices from my providers, because NDIA doesn't have the individual invoices up on the portal. They just have bulk claims on their system. So you don't have the detail on the participant portal. So I actually have a document where I actually record all of my provider invoices, because that's the only place that I can actually have that detail. So you need to be organised and have the time. You need general administration, budgeting and computer skills, because you have to work out, you have to know at any particular time where your budget is. There's a lovely little report on the participant portal called a support budget, and it gives you a percentage of what you've spent and what the balance is. So, if I'm 3 months into my plan, I can look at that, and if I've spent 20% of my funds, I'm pretty happy because I'm running close to a 25% budget then, so 5% leeway is not too bad. So you'll always be running a little bit behind because you won't have received all of your accounts. I use that as my budgeting tool, but also I know in my head how much my personal care bills should be each week. And if I get a bill that's, a lot more than my average, there'll be a reason usually, but it will alert me, has a mistake been made or something like that. So you have to keep your finger on the pulse as far as your budget is concerned, because you don't want to run out towards the end of the plan. But in the same case, you don't want too much left at the end of the plan. NDIA's given you funds, the reasonable and necessary funds that you need to support your family member for the year. So you need to make it last. If you run out, you can ask for a review before the money runs out, and NDIA will certainly try and do a review quickly for you. But if you think you're going to run out of funds halfway through the year and you've only spent 60%, NDIA is not going to give you a review because, you've still got 40% of your funds left, and if you carefully manage the funds for the next 6 months, you'll be okay. So overspending is not to them is not an excuse to put your hand up and ask for a plan review when you've still got funds left. So NDIA in most cases are not unreasonable, but the budgeting part of it is important, and it is totally up to the family, regardless of the funding method, the management method of the funds. It's up to you to budget. You can get more information on the NDIA website from Valid on self-managing. There actually isn't as much information out there as there should be. I will continue to self-manage my daughter's plan because I'm a control freak and I like to know what's going on, and I want my finger on the pulse. But I'm actually considering, as I move forward and I want to do less myself, that perhaps I'll get a plan manager to do some of the typical bills so that our service providers get paid more regularly, because with me doing it, it takes a little bit longer for them to get paid. So now that I'm comfortable with my service providers and I'm comfortable with the way the NDIA works, getting a plan manager might be a good solution for us, sort of a halfway mark. I think I've told you most of the stuff about self-managing. Just, I suppose, to get to a bit of a personal level, is that originally self-managing just about killed me with NDIA. It was really complicated and really difficult. But NDIA have made lots of improvements to the portal so that it is, you can now self-manage without too much difficulty. So the thing is that you will hear stories about there. You'll hear, terrible stories about people's experience of self-managing, and I'd be saying yes, that would have happened, but now there's less likelihood of you having a really bad experience with self-management. I can't tell you which method to use. Plan management is middle of the road, so you could always start there. But if you've got big regular services that you trust will bill you correctly, start with NDIA managed. For your first plan, there's so much for you to learn and experience, and to complicate it with trying to manage money and budget on your own, is a big step. So take on all the help that's out there. Ask for support coordination. Get plan management so that you have, you have the flexibility, but you also have somebody to help you to set up the budget.